properties. So this is on the back of your chart. Okay, some of the properties that we looked at are on this sheet, not all of them though. I didn't know if we necessarily needed to go through all of them. We had the ones that were most important. So you have some problems to work once you get to your review sheet. But on here, we are just going to quickly review the most important ones. Distributive property, I think you guys know this one by now. That is when you have a number outside that is going to be distributed to the information on the inside. And it doesn't matter, you could have 2 or 3 or 5 things on the inside of the parentheses, and it doesn't matter if they are attached with addition or subtraction. But when you are done, you're going to, when you distribute, you would end up with A, B, and then whatever it is, plus or minus A, C. So that's just using variables only to describe distributive property. Additive inverse, that is when you add a number with its opposite and it always equals 0. And the reason why that property is important, that's the one we use in elimination, is the additive inverse. So that's what allows us to cancel something in elimination. Multiplicative inverse, that's when you are multiplying by its opposite, which is a reciprocal. You always get 1. So whenever you multiply a number by its reciprocal, it always equals 1. And that's the inverse of multiplication. Reflexive property, when we were going through the properties, I told you that eventually we would get to where where you would need to use that. And that was once we got to geometry. So if you remember when we looked at segments like AB, we would say that AB is congruent to AB because that's reflexive property. So this would, if you said AB was congruent to AB, that was reflexive property. And the reason why we use that was if we had, most of the time we had a segment, sometimes you have an angle that is used in more than one shape. You're just showing that just because it's in a different shape doesn't mean it's a different size. Symmetric property is the one that allows us when we're solving a problem to switch sides. So sometimes you might end up with something like 2x minus 5 equals y, but when we say the formula for a linear equation, we say it's y equals mx plus b. So the symmetric property allows you to switch things on the equal sign. Same thing happens with inequalities though also. So if you had 5 is less than m, you could rewrite that as m is greater than 5. That's the reflexive property. Allows you to switch your right and left sides as long as you keep the symbol or the sign consistent. Okay, properties of equalities. There's actually 4 of them. There's adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And this is what lets us solve equations. So if you had y minus 3 equals 7 and you added 3 to both sides, that's the addition property of equality because you added 3 to both sides. So the subtraction property of equality would look like this. If you subtracted something on both sides, that's going to be the subtraction property of equality because you subtracted something on both sides. If you had m over 3 equals 2, if you were multiplying both sides by a number like this, like multiply both sides by 3 so that that would cancel, that right there, that step is the multiplication property of equality. And that one isn't as common. The division one is more common. So if you had 9n equals 27, if you go through and divide both sides by the same number, that right there is the division property of equality. So that covers your properties.